Kelly is our guest speaker tonight, and she has what would you call it? Talking about brave parenting. She has a ministry, that would be a good word. The English teacher who has stepped out of the classroom for a year is already feeling it. She has a ministry called Brave Parenting, and she is here tonight to talk to you about social media and some of the things that she can, the expertise that she has in helping you with guiding your students, guiding your children in this world that is just saturated with social media and technology and all of that. So if you could please welcome Kelly, I would appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Good evening. So my name is Kelly. I am a brave parent of 7 children who I have adopted out of the foster care system. So if you're wondering where I got a little of my experience and knowing how to handle this is kind of it. In 2012, when technology was sort of like really at its peak and everyone was getting smartphones, I adopted a teenager who was 15 years old, and I quickly learned everything that could possibly happen on a smartphone. A couple years later, she had created Facebook accounts that we didn't know about, connected with people all over the country, ran away, and was gone for 5 days before someone came to our house and finally said, "I know where your daughter is and you need to go get her because she's about to be trafficked." This is a huge wake-up call for me and my husband in the sense of, wow, we really need to get a handle on this. My daughter ended up being fine. She came home. That story is redeemed, praise the Lord. But I really learned, like, wow, we don't know what we're doing. That was my thought. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't think any of the other parents know what they're doing, because I could restrict my daughter's phone, I could teach her all this kind of stuff, but she could go to school and get on anyone else's device or hack around the computer or do whatever it is that she wanted to do and found a way. So I realized that someone needed to just start talking about it and realize and start, like, what's the standard? What should we be doing here? And come together as a body, really a body of believers, as a believer myself, but really as parents as a whole, to kind of get a grasp on this so that we don't lose our children to this rapid technology. So today we're going to talk about setting godly standards. So there's not one specific rule that I can tell you. There's not one answer that's going to be your cure-all. It's a very hard, arduous process as a parent to guide your kids through this technology. But what I want to do is share what I have learned through 4 or 5 years of pouring myself into the research of all of this, as well as what I've learned hands-on with my own kids, and setting standards that can actually help protect them and build their character in the meantime, right? So I can't give you exactly what God says, right, in the Bible, how to handle a smartphone. But I think we all have a good idea of how to set these godly standards in a way that we want them to be developing the character that God desires while they're growing up. And if technology is changing that character, then we have a problem, and we need to set some standards to protect that character so that when they go forward, right, when they're an adult and the smartphone and video games and all of that maybe has died down, they're only going to be left with their character. And that's what we want to make sure, that they can stand firm on who they are and not have wavered back and forth through their teen years about what the world has said they were, because they've poured themselves into technology. So let's first talk about choices. First, our choices, right? It seems like now with technology, we almost don't really have that much choice. Whether the school is issuing a tablet or an iPad, or they just almost feel like you have to get them a phone, and you sort of have to have this one app in order to do this one thing. So it kind of feels like, in a way, that we don't have choices anymore, that it's a necessity to be this. So let's take a look. So we have the choice whether or not we adapt, right? We see this sweet old man who has a grandparent or someone who's on social media, has a smartphone, they've completely adapted, right? They're out there, and they just jump right in. But then there's also those 70 or 80-year-olds who are nope, not me. I'm just going to use my, landline until I die. And that's fine, right? So we also have couples who have adapted in the sense that that they're no longer spending time together. Have you been to a restaurant when you've seen a married couple and instead of talking and engaging, they're just staring at their own phones? In a way, it's kind of heartbreaking because what did they do before their phones? They probably talked. Maybe they read the newspaper, right? But either way, they too are adapting. The parents, the grandparents. We see this young mom and her son at the movie theater. How often and how common it is that we sort of ignore or disengage with another person because our phone is more exciting, or is more entertaining, or is more stimulating, right? You want to check that email, that someone liked my post, all of those type of things. Whereas talking to a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, right? Maybe that's kind of boring. So how often do we see that, right? And then we also see this role modeling that we're doing as parents, right? If they see us posting on social media, if they see us taking selfies, if they see us ruled by our phones, they too are going to step into the same type of behavior. So whether we're adapting, whether we're self-entertaining or phubbing as we call it, whether we're ignoring or we're setting an example, we choose this. This is us as adults choosing this. But what about our children? If you have an infant who just craves that phone, it doesn't take very long. I have a little granddaughter now. My oldest had a baby last year. And so now I've got about a 1-year-old. And let me tell you, it doesn't take very long for her to grab that phone. They know, right? But ultimately, that little baby looking at that screen, whose choice is that? That's mine, that's mom's, that's someone who gave that child the phone. That is not the child's choice. Of course they'll choose it. It's bright, it's colorful, it's entertaining. They're always going to choose it. The boy outside, go outside and play. This is what they think sometimes, right? They want to bring their device outside. Going outside and play has lost that meaning, that desire. That when we grew up, what going outside and play meant is now different. Now they are attached to their device. So now they're outside, they're enjoying nature, right? But they're playing games. Whose choice is that? Ultimately, they're going to choose it because that's what their brain is telling them to do. How much time is spent on social media? They will choose social media, hands down. Because it is that enticing to the brain. It is that rewarding to the brain to constantly be scrolling, constantly be seeing something new, and to get those rewards of likes. But again, who is truly making the choice and allowing that? The video games? Whether they play Fortnite for 8 hours, or they play it for 1 hour, or they're playing something else, right? Ultimately, their brains are going to choose it, but we as the parents ultimately have that choice. So, this is what you need to remember. I choose. I am the one making the choice. When it comes down to it, as parents, we are the ones making the choice. Whether our kids are playing on their tablet, you can't get mad because they want to play on their tablet. It's the most exciting thing for them. It was designed to stimulate their brain. But we're the ones who are allowing it. So, and if we aren't setting boundaries, like healthy boundaries for ourselves, in the sense of, I'm not going to be on my phone while my kids are home, or from after school until bedtime. I'm going to set my phone down, I'm not going to be on it. If we're not making like a healthy choice similar to that, do you think our kids are ever going to make a healthy choice of, you know what, I really should just put my phone down and not be on it for a while? Never, if we're not role modeling it. So the reality is that this technology and all of these advancement, it really looks like freedom to us. That's what it feels like. But ultimately, it's just convenience. It's the convenience that we have every single thing that we could possibly have right here in one single device. But what that ends up feeling like for kids is entitlement. I want that convenience. I want it right now. I don't need to wait. I don't need patience. I don't need character and all this other sort of stuff, right? I deserve it because everyone else has it. And that ultimately is bondage. Because they feel entitled to it, they feel like they need it, it's the convenience, it's the necessity, so they don't feel like they have a choice, right? How many people have, their child has asked for a smartphone as though there is no other choice on the planet? You've got to say yes, because they would die. They will just die without it. This is exactly where You know, the enemy wants our children, is in bondage. A former Facebook exec last year came out and said that essentially the devil is in our smartphones, and what we have created here at Facebook is just a monster. So he went public and said this, and he literally said the devil is in our smartphones. So, and a lot of people, you know, bucked up against that and kind of said, oh, you know, he's just being dramatic, or, you know, whatever, he doesn't work at Facebook anymore. But the truth of it is, think about the temptation. If you think about how Jesus was tempted, how anybody else in the Bible was tempted, there is so much temptation, and that's exactly what Satan loves. He loves to have our kids trapped in this one singular device where they can be tempted. Romans 12:2, very common, right? You probably know this. Do not conform to the patterns of this world. We know this. So, of course, we sort of have to adapt a little bit because this is how the world is, right? I'm using technology right now, right, as I speak. I use technology to get here, my GPS on my phone. However, the conforming is where our character is all of a sudden looking like the world and not like Jesus. And that's where we really need to be careful, is to make sure that their character, offline and online, models that of Jesus and of good character that will hold them throughout their life. So let's take a look. I want to show you why this is such a big deal.Maybe. Nope, the slide's not up. Okay, never mind. In 2012, I'm just going to tell you the statistic. In 2012, 23% of children ages 12 to 17 had a smartphone. So 2012, 23%, so like 1 in 4. Of that 23%, only 8% were ages 12 and 13. So now it's 2019, so let's say 7 years ago, not that long ago, 8% of 12 and 13-year-olds had a smartphone. Now, as of 2018, the last statistic, 95%. 95%. So we went from 8% to 95% of our 12 and 13-year-olds having a super-powered computer in their back pocket in 7 years. So that's a big deal. That's why all of a sudden you feel like I'm going crazy and I can't get a handle on this, and why is this so crazy and my kids know more, and I don't know. It's because it literally has taken us, like a tidal wave came over us, and now in the past couple of years we're starting to come up, get our head above water and say, okay, what do we need to do, right? They have their phone, now what do I do? Or they're asking for a phone, what do I do? So let's talk about some truth. The first truth about technology, going forward, so you can set these standards, and this is on your notes for those type A people who love to take notes. Tech savvy is not tech mature. It is not hard to figure out a smartphone. In 2008, when I got my first iPhone, I had a 2-year-old, and I used to think, oh man, my child is so smart. They can, they know how to use this and use these apps, and they know where to go. And I really thought my child was special. Every child, it's intuitive, right? They literally have made it so easy. So it doesn't take but a child, a small, even infant, to figure out how to use these type of devices and this technology. If you hand a child an Xbox controller, they can figure it out. If you hand an adult an Xbox controller, no way, right? I mean, they are going to be tech savvy just by the nature of their brain and their growth and just of the world that they're growing up in. However, there is a big difference between tech mature, right? Because you can get into all of the nitty-gritty into a computer and figure out how to get around every sort of parental control that you could find. That's not maturity. Maturity is knowing this isn't really good for me, and I really shouldn't be spending this much time on it, therefore, it's time to put it away, right? That's a big difference. So tech savvy is not tech mature. To reiterate this, let's look and see how kids are actually using their smartphones. This statistic, I have not found a new statistic from 2016, since 2016, so it may change, but 72% of kids are using their smartphones to play games. Then right behind it, 71% is for social media. So you can see They go from playing on tablets and playing like educational games to help them learn and all these fun things to keep them occupied at the grocery store, at the doctor's office. And then they get their own device and they continue that same behavior. They continue playing games. And then they're on social media. But you see, less than half of them are using it for their actual communication device. So does this really look like maturity? It looks like childhood. And that's okay, because they're children. But it's not necessarily maturity. But where that balance has to be is that because they're not tech mature, they need standards for use on how they're going to be using this. And again, who chooses this, right? The second truth is tech consumed is not healthy. It's not really a fancy way to say that. Being obsessed with your smartphone, being obsessed with a video game, being obsessed with your social media accounts, all of that at a young age, plain and simple, is not healthy. There's too much off of the screen that needs to happen in a child's life that isn't happening when they're tech obsessed, right? The relationships, their physical health, their physical well-being, their mental well-being, all of that is in grave jeopardy when they are tech consumed, staring at a screen, whether that be a video game, a social media, whatever it is on their phone, texting. And the enemy loves to tell lies, right, to us and our kids, right, that they need to know this technology. How can they not be submersed in it? Because this is the world they're growing up in. They need to know it. But of course they're going to know it, whether you teach them at 12 or you teach them at 17. A technology. They're going to learn it just as quickly. That they won't have any friends if they don't completely obsess over the media that all their friends are obsessing over, right? If they're not on social media, I'm not going to have a single friend. No one is going to want to talk to me. No one is going to want to play with me. And all my friends are on Fortnite. That's the only way I'm going to be able to talk to my friends is if I can connect and communicate over this video game. But that's such a lie because they will have friends. And that they won't be relevant. We want our kids to be relevant in society, right? We kind of want them to be popular, or we want them to be, the best athlete, to be, achieving at all optimal levels. And so therefore, they need to be everywhere that everyone else is. Whether they be on social media, whether they have their own YouTube channel. These are all the enemy lies. But the biggest lie is that when kids are tech consumed, it's easier for you. Right? When they're playing all day on their game, you don't have to parent. When they're staring at their screen, you don't have to have the difficult conversations because they don't want to talk to you. And if the screen makes them happy, why not? Why not just let them be on it? I want my child to be happy. Why not just let them be on it? It's less work for me. They're happy. And that's where a lot of us as parents have fallen into. Why not just let them? And the reason is because they're losing their character. Who they are is actually changing so that we are producing less, not only, believers and followers as adults, as young adults, but they're changing who they are and their worth and their self-worth. They're being defined by the world, their ambitions and their dreams, right? All of a sudden now we have half of 12-year-old boys who want to be a professional video game player when asked. That's a big, what happened to doctors and lawyers, right? 64% of children have their own mobile device by the age of 4. The average age for you to receive your first smartphone is 10.3 years old. So in case you're curious, that puts you in 5th grade. 5th grade is the average age. Average, so we definitely have younger ones going in there. And teens use an average of 9 hours of media per day. So what I find is really interesting is that 8 and 9-year-olds, on average, when tested, use about 2 hours of media per day. So that's kind of about right. Most parents, I will tell them, 2 hours is probably about the time that's about okay. 2 hours on video games or 2 hours on a tablet or something throughout the day. Then we have 13 to 17-year-olds that are 9 hours. So we go from 8 and 9, 2 hours, to 9 hours. And this is this age between 9 and 13. This is the age where they're getting their phone. This is the age of puberty. This is the age of tons and tons of transition and growth. And they're going from 2 hours to 9 hours. So it's skyrocketing. That sort of consumption is not healthy. It's not healthy for their mental well-being either. Since the first smartphone, suicide rates for age of children 10 to 14 has doubled. Perhaps you've heard some of these statistics. There's more and more research that is starting to finally come out, but the suicide one is one of the most concerning. Because you can say, well, are depressed kids more likely to spend more time on technology? Or is spending a lot of time on technology making kids depressed, right? What came first, the chicken or the egg? We don't know, but what we do know is all of a sudden, suicide rates for children are skyrocketing at the same time that technology consumption is also increasing. So it's definitely corollary. Also, research has shown that social media, more than an hour and 40 minutes a day, makes you 56% more likely to be unhappy. So an hour really a day, hour and 40 minutes for a teenager really isn't that much. But 56% more likely to be unhappy, like to say, I'm unhappy with my life. It also puts you at a 27% risk of clinical depression, of suicidal risk factors, such as cutting. We can say tech savvy does not necessarily mean tech mature. Just because they can spend all of their time doing these things does not mean that their brain has the actual maturity and health to be able to handle this all. So let's go on to truth number 3. Tech savvy and consumed does not equal success. So savvy and consumed does not equal success. So now kids view YouTubers, streamers, gamers, social media influencers, all of these people, and this success, this like widespread fame and popularity, making money off of doing something they love, they see this as very attainable, very relatable. Who is a child who wants to be a video game player? Right? Like, it's a real goal. And now that there's even colleges who are offering scholarships for video games. And so now it's like, well, this can definitely be my lifelong goal. I can play video games for a living, and this could be my life, right? However, when they're savvy, they can do all the things that they want, they're consumed, I mean they're spending all their time doing all of this stuff, it does not equal success because they're not having a balance. There's not a balance of physical activity and relational activity. They're pouring themselves all into this one thing. So maybe it's a social media thing, right? They want to be an influencer. They want to be, they want to have 10,000 followers on Instagram. They want to, post YouTube videos of whatever, right? And they want to have millions of followers. But the thing is the people who actually succeed at that are spending their entire life doing this, right? So the most popular Fortnite player, whose name is Ninja, if you've ever heard of him, he spends 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, streaming online. So yeah, he makes millions. That's a 12-hour-a-day job playing a video game. And so that's what a lot of kids will want to do. I hear from parents all the time. Well, my kids will say they've got to play at least 8 hours in order to get this sort of level, in order to be able to stream and have people follow them. Not healthy. Because where's the balance? Where's the physical activity? In order to maintain that and actually reach success, you're going to have to pour everything you have in there. So because they're trying to do this though, and because it seems so attainable and so relatable, and I can just create a YouTube channel and I can be famous, right? Something funny happens in my family and I'll hear my kids say, oh, we need to post on YouTube, we could totally go viral and everybody will watch it, right? It's just the way that their minds think now. But they've lost some of their coping skills, right? They've lost some of their perseverance and their resilience skills. It's not as easy, like failure is different online than failure is in real life, right? You can die in a video game and then you can just start it back up and just create a new life. You can, create your own new brand on this social media account or this YouTube account. You can just start over. You can just be whoever you want. You can start new. You posted something, it didn't do very well, you can just delete that picture, try again and post a better picture at a better time of the day and try and hope that you get more likes, right? So there's this whole redoing. I can just redo it. I can just recreate. That's changing the way that they're thinking, and they're not coping, and they're not as resilient as they once were. Some headlines here. Gen Z is anxious, distrustful, and often downright miserable, a new poll reveals. Gen Z is the loneliest generation, and it's not just because of social media. The loneliest of Generation Z reflects not just rising social media use, but a broader decline in interactions with neighbors, coworkers, and church friends. While adult generations say family is the most important to their sense of self, Generation Z's identity is most defined by personal achievement. This is this idea of success. Like, I think that if I am consumed and savvy in all that I can do on this technology, I can reach success. And to them, personal achievement is everything. Whereas with us, and all the generations in the past, we considered our family and the relationships that we held to be how we defined our success and how we defined our self-worth. But now they're defining it on their success, on what they can achieve. And so that's what's really concerning. Yes, they're lonely because they're missing that real life-to-life, face-to-face interactions. But they're also confused because they feel like personal achievement is the only way to define themselves. So we have this contrast where we have all this screen media that we can't get away from. It's everywhere. What do? But we really need character. So we're not going to be able to just go off the grid, go onto a compound, send up smoke signals to communicate. It's not going to happen. We're not going to get rid of our smartphones. Very few of us will even, get rid of our or go to a flip phone or even use a landline anymore, right? So this is the way that it is. So we've got to use character. We've got to figure out a way to set these standards for character, for our own transformation and sanctification, but also for our children's. This is really, really huge. Many years ago, Harvard did one of its longest longitudinal studies ever done, and it was on what is the key to happiness. And they studied every, person imaginable, from presidents to, the lowest of people, to farmers, to everybody, all across the country. And they came to one definitive answer as to what was the key to happiness. And that was relationships. That was the one thing that could narrow it down, is relationships. And that's where we really have to focus on, is how are our children's relationships? Because that is where character is refined, it is built, it is strengthened, it is done all in relationships. And yes, they can have relationships online, but that's not how Jesus did it, right? He did it life on life. And that is really where we need to go. So when we think, we're going to talk about some character traits and how we can set standards based on these character traits, keep in mind that relationships are at the key. All right, so we're going to talk about setting some godly standards for character. You also have these listed out already, and then I'm going to go through some of them. The first one is patience. So, now with technology, who really has patience? I mean, if the app won't open in about 2 seconds, we're frustrated, right? If the email won't download, maybe 3 seconds, maybe we'll give it, we're like scrolling, waiting for that, update, circle to update and to load, right? We've lost our patience. And when it comes to our children, hands down, right? They have very little anymore. They're not required to say, wait for a mail to come, right? They have no idea what that's like. They don't rarely have to wait for their food, right? There's so much fast food, so much instant, so much immediate that they are used to it. Their patience is a really lost virtue in our young generation right now. So how I believe that you can set this standard for patience is wait for the privilege. If you're gonna write down, wait for the privilege. And I go into all of these character traits in depth in my book, but we're gonna go over some of them. So wait for the privilege is essentially like, you may have a 13-year-old who does have a smartphone. That doesn't necessarily mean that your 8-year-old also gets a smartphone too, because you're getting them all at one time. They need to wait for the privilege. Just because, your neighbor is playing, this, rated video game does not mean that your 10-year-old also needs to play that game, right? Everything needs wait for the privilege. There's a privilege that will come, right? We all grow up, we all become adults, we get those freedoms, but too often we're just giving all of the freedoms to them right away. You're 9, okay, you got a smartphone, there you go, have all these apps, have all these games, do all this sort of stuff. So we need to help our kids realize that one day you will have the privilege of having your own smartphone, or one day you will have the privilege of playing that game, but right now, I need you to practice patience. They need to understand what patience is and why it's important, why that virtue is needed. So for me, I say, okay, well, you can only get one new game a week, on your, iPod or your tablet. So if you ask throughout the week, can I have a new game? Can I have a new game? Well, that's not practicing patience, right? Because you're going to get one, and maybe that's going to be on Saturday, and so you need to wait for that privilege of getting that new game, right? So that's one way that you can apply it. You can say, social media. I don't believe that you're ready at 12 years old to have social media. I don't believe you're ready at 13. I don't believe you're at 14. One day you will be, but right now you need to wait for that privilege. So that standard might be different for every child. But we need to make sure that we are telling our kids and expressing that freedom will come. But if you have that freedom right now, it's just going to become bondage because they don't have the maturity for it. They don't have the brain power for it. They're not equipped in their character in order to handle that. So we tell them and expect them to practice that patience. And then we hold them accountable to that patience. That's where it's important. But guess what? It takes our patience. It takes a lot of our patience because that means they're going to ask and they're going to ask and they're going to annoy you and you're going to get worn down and you're going to want to just be like, okay, fine, take it, right? Be done. Like, I'm tired of asking. So it's honing our character at the same time of practicing our patience. Another character trait is respect. And respect is boundaries for everyone. Every single one of us, whether adult, grandparent, child, all have boundaries that we should be upholding with our technology use. So maybe that's that you're not in a conversation. Say you meet up with someone at the grocery store and you're like, oh, hey, how you doing? Great. And then your phone starts buzzing and you just take it out just to look and see who texts you. It happens all the time, right? But we are showing that relationship that this person, who just buzzed my phone in my pocket is more important, right? Because I'm going to check, even though I'm only talking to you for a few minutes. So those boundaries we need to uphold ourselves. And we model that for our kids, and then we tell our kids and expect our kids, when you are talking to someone, right, this is the healthy place of respect inside a relationship. So you model it, and then you expect them to model it. You hold that expectation out there, and expect them to abide by that. And of course, it's such a learning process, and it's a talking process. It's a communication process on a constant basis between you and your child. Whether or not you feel like you're super tech savvy, the thing is you know character. You know this stuff because you were raised to have all of these character traits and you know it. And so now you just need to take the basics and apply it into your relationship with your child and their technology, right? You can say, okay, you're playing a video game. Hey, but the boundary that we're going to set up that I need you to respect is that I'm going to give you a 5-minute warning when your time is up. And when that time is up, then you're off. There's no begging for more time or one more game or whatever, or you just ignore me, right? That's the boundary. You set it up and then you expect them to respect that boundary. So we have those boundaries and then our children as well. Another one is kindness. So really, since the advent of text messaging, really, right, since we can say things online in written form without looking someone in the eye, without seeing their expression, we have sort of lost this virtue of kindness. We've seen a huge increase in bullying, cyberbullying, trolling, all of these kind of hate stuff that's going on the internet. So one standard that we should absolutely set as a basic is kind communication, kindness. It's really simple. When your child gets a smartphone, hands down, whether they're 12, whether they're 10, whether they're 30, it doesn't matter, whatever their age are, they will not know how to digitally communicate properly without your help. They won't, because they're still learning regular verbal communication. And then when you give them the ability to type something and the only expression they can use is emojis, which granted, emojis help for sure, but they don't always know, right? So when they first get a smartphone, you need to be reading their text messages and helping them along. Hey, I see that you said this, but I think this came across wrong because do you see how this person responded? And then all of a sudden, they were in an argument. If you've ever read kids' text messages, it's really easy to see where one line went wrong or was taken wrong, and you help guide them. Well, what is something kinder that you could have said? Or how could you have responded differently? They need to know this because they're not going to know. It's not intuitive to them. Otherwise, they just try and navigate through it in their text, acronym, whatever, I'm not your friend anymore kind of way, right? Middle school is hard enough. Add on top of it the lack of, verbal communication with one another. They need our help. So setting a standard for kindness is, I'm going to read your text messages for the first 6 months, for the first year, for the first 2 years, however long. And then we're going to talk about them. If I see something that's alarming, we're going to talk about it. We're going to make sure that you know how to effectively communicate digitally with another person. You can also set other sort of rules inside of that, as in, if you're speaking to an adult, if you're texting an adult, or if you're texting a teacher, you always address them, Miss Kelly, blah, 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 whatever, or some sort of respectful type thing. Because if not, I've had children text me as though I'm 13, right? And I'm like, who is this? Right? As adults, we expect that respect, and so we need to tell our kids and make sure that they know, and then we hold them accountable. Where we're losing a lot of the character in their communication and in their kindness is because we're just not holding them accountable. No one really wants to read their text messages unless, you really just want to spy on them, because it's kind of painful. It's kind of tedious and painstaking to kind of read what they're talking about. But during that first year, during this crucial time, it's really important that you're helping them and making sure that they're kind. If you knew every word that they were saying, you would know that maybe they were bullying or that they were tending to be that way. Because the fact is that every bully has a parent who could be reading the text messages. And every child who's being bullied could be also reading them to see what's going on before it gets to a point that's out of control. The next character trait is honesty. So I set this as no lies, nothing deleted. It's pretty standard. Most Christian families, I think, have a rule of don't tell lies. It's pretty basic. But on their phones, on technology, on media in general, it is really easy to tell lies. It just is. It's easy to fabricate, it's easy to make something up and say that, oh yeah, my parents, drive, this car or whatever. And then they don't, because this person will never know the truth. It's also easy to delete everything and to hide those type of conversations. So when you set the standard, hey, I know how easy it is for you to lie over text message, or I know how easy it is to lie online and say different stuff, and I also know how easy it is for you to delete it and to hide all of this content from me. So we're going to set a standard, because honesty is a virtue that not only God desires, but that is honored in our world, right? It will carry them through life. Then we set this standard, and then we hold them accountable. Say, how on earth do you hold them accountable? Well, I'm going to tell you at the end here some software that can help you find deleted content. But it's also, when you're if during that first year, you can kind of tell, are they telling lies? Set that standard right from the get-go. That first year of having a smartphone and interacting, whether it be social media or whatever they're first engaging with digitally, can set the tone for how you know that they're going to interact online. Are you going to be able to find everything? No way, you're not. I mean, there are chances they're going to delete stuff, they're going to find ways. But when you set the standard from the beginning, this is how they know that technology is going to be used. I'm going to use it in an honest way. Other people might be dishonest, but I'm going to be held accountable if I'm lying. And I'm going to be held accountable by my parents if I'm deleting all of my texts. The next one is self-control. This one is probably my favorite of all because our kids really have very little self-control when it comes to their technology. So for self-control, I say limited quantity and limited time. And that can be on a lot of things, right? So you can say, for example, video games. You have 2 hours of video games today, so you can use it as you choose. So they may spend 30 minutes, doing one thing, and then their friend wants to come over and they want to play something, to last all. Well, they have to allot that time appropriately, or maybe you're only giving them an hour or whatever it is, and then they have to, practice self-control in the sense that that's it. That's how much time I was allotted. I need to use that time appropriately. Say, for example, this one is how I trained my kids to do this, is I limited how many text messages they could send. So I would say, how many text messages do you think that you're going to send a day? They'd say, maybe about 100. It's like middle school years. Like 100. Okay, great, 100 a day. So I'm going to allot 3,000 text messages to your phone. Now, that 3,000 has to last the entire phone cycle. So, you have 30 days, 3,000 text messages. Guess what? Day 15 comes, they're out. So they have to then they realize, oh my gosh, I'm using more than this, right? And so then I would say, can I have more text messages? No. You have to talk on the phone or figure out another way to communicate. Next time, practice self-control, right? Because you choose who those text messages are coming from or who you're sending them to. So then what would happen is they would start to get low on text messages, and then so some people would text because they're bored, and that's all they do is they just shoot out, like 10 Ks looking for someone to talk to. And then I would hear my children say, I'm not responding to that. I'm not wasting a text on that person. Finally, right? Because it's unlimited. Because text messages are unlimited, they feel no need to practice any self-control. I mean, when we had to pay for our text messages, we practice self-control. I mean, to be honest, we probably don't practice very much self-control ourselves when it comes to text messages, but we're adults. We already have this character, right? We already have this self-control muscle built over years, right, of tests and trials. So for our kids, they need something. Something is going to have to actually force them to practice this virtue of self-control. So, maybe that's that text message, maybe it's a limited time, maybe it's you cut off at 9 o'clock at night, I need to have the phone back, so you need to get all of your stuff done between this time. Or between 7 and 9, you're doing homework, you have 30 minutes afterwards to get everything, on your phone in before you turn in. Whatever that boundary looks like, we have to give them an allotment and expect them to practice self-control. Because if they're not practicing it and we're not holding them accountable to practice it, they just won't. And so self-control will be completely lost. And so why we see, 2-year-old men still living in their parents' basement playing video games all day long and not getting a job, right? I mean, because honestly, no one's holding them accountable to practice any self-control of stop playing and to go do something, right? Okay, the next one is humility and modesty. I sort of put these together because they sort of go together. Humility, we're going to, this is how I believe that one way that you can do this with the smartphones is to maintain this humble character is no selfies. Kids hate this, so just expect tons of pushback. But there is no way to really hone a humble character when they're taking hundreds of pictures of themselves a day for no reason. other than to see themselves and to see how good they look, right? That's just vanity. It's just vanity, and it is not humble. I can list 10 scriptures, right, that talk about, you know, the love of self and being humble, and taking selfies all the time isn't. Right, so I set a standard of no selfies. If I find selfies, not only am I going to delete them, but I can just turn your camera off. Right, there are settings on phones that you can just shut the camera off. So if they like the ability to take pictures, no selfies. It's especially important with girls. And especially young girls, right? Because during those middle school years when their worth is like really being formed and it's tough. And if they're constantly focusing on themselves, taking pictures of themselves, putting themselves out there on social media, saying, judge me, tell me I'm pretty, tell me I'm beautiful, tell me I'm this, tell me I'm that, and then they don't get it, then they feel worthless because they're holding their worth all out on that one thing, all on that one selfie that they were able to take. The standard for modesty is no multimedia messaging. So this is the sending and receiving of pictures, especially through the middle school years. So the iPhone, the Androids too, you have to use a separate app, but they have settings where you can actually turn off the multimedia messaging. So sexting is just huge. It's everywhere, it's rampant in middle schools. I have not spoke at a middle school where I have not had the administration tell me that at least 50% of their week is dealing with sexting issues going on in the school. And I speak at a lot of public schools. But it's huge, and it takes up administration time, and it's killing our kids, even though they're engaging it. They don't realize, what it's actually doing to them. So if we turn it off, guess what? They have no ability to send and receive pictures. Someone wants to text them and say, hey, send me a nude. Guess what? Sorry, parents, turn that feature off, right? They don't even have the option. They don't even have to go through the thought process of, do I send it? Do I not send it? If I don't send it, then they're going to talk bad about me. Like that whole process that goes through a young girl's mind, or even boys, but mainly girls, where they actually have to debate that. They should not even be debating that, right? We want to protect their modesty. Keep them from having nude pictures out there on the internet. Because once they're out there, they're out there. If they were sent once, you can expect that they've probably been shared. I think the statistic is 82% of photos, nude photos, were shared more than once when they were only meant for one person. I had a parent come to me after a school event and say that her daughter, or her friends, or daughter's friends, gave her Snapchat account while they were on vacation so that she could keep up streaks. And the friend went into the Snapchat account and found all of these inappropriate photos. And these were like best friends. And the friend, just thinking it was funny, just went ahead and shared them all over the place while she was going on vacation. So when she came home, it was everywhere. And the girl was like, oh, I didn't even think. I just thought, sadly, that's the problem. Like, that's the problem of character. If we're not even thinking, like if some of our kids out there aren't even thinking, like, oh, let me just share this, this child's nude photos that they have in their phone, right? But the problem is also at the source. If they're not even thinking, I shouldn't have nude photos on my phone, that's also the problem, right? So we need to set the standard. That conversation just needs to not be taboo. They need to know right away. Like by the time they are in, like really 5th or 6th grade, they need to know what sexting is because it's happening and people are talking about it, whether you're talking about it or not, is going on all around them and they probably already know. So they need to know your standard and what you say about it and how you are going to approach it and make sure that you're protecting them. Because again, who chooses? I mean, ultimately they're going to do what the peers and the culture and everyone is kind of forcing them to do. But the standard that you set can actually protect them. And the last one is self-worth. And this is delayed access to social media. So social media companies allow you to create an account at 13 because that is when they can legally collect data on you. However, the average age for a first social media account is age 11. So either that's because they're bypassing their parents, and they're saying that they're older and they're creating an account, or their parents know about it and they've acquiesced and they're on social media. So at age 11, we have to remember, this is when we see this steep increase from like 2 hours at age 9 all the way up to 9 hours. It's huge. And they are truly defining their worth based on what the world says. And it's not just the world. We have to remember that this is not just their friends that they are communicating with. This is, behind the scenes, a artificially intelligent supercomputer analyzing every single thing that they do, reprogramming the algorithm to keep them scrolling, to give them a like right when they close the app. Did you know that Instagram actually gives you a like when you close the app? They pop up another new like that they reserve so that you go back into the app, open it back up, and start using it again. These are not just their friends that they're interacting with. This is like, super machine interacting for them between their friends. It is artificial relationships. So they can say, I have to be on social media because this is where my friends are, and otherwise I will not have any friends. It's a lie. That is not really, truly where their friends are. Now I can tell you that this will be one of the fiercest battles that you will ever fight. There were times when I truly thought that my daughter and I were not going to survive that battle. She's here with me tonight, and she will tell you she survived. And she has friends. And not only that, you realize who your true friends are because they actually will text you to call you to get together and not just post stuff on social media about that. So you really define, your kids get to define who they really are friends with and not just who conveniently has a lot of friends on social media and wants to connect. The age that I say is 16 for social media. And that might seem kind of old, but the reason is because all the statistics show that levels of depression, levels of unhappiness, and suicidal risk factors do not start tapering off until 10th grade. They are really high through 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. If you think about it, this is like the most tumultuous